Hello everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Dissenter. I'm your host as always, Ricardo Lopes, and today I'm joined by the authors of The Illusionist Brain, The Neuroscience of Magic, Doctors Jordi Camí and Miguel Martínez. So welcome both to the show, and it's a huge pleasure to have you.
Likewise, thank you very much, Ricardo, for having us.
So let's definition. What defines magic as you explore it in this book?
I think that magic is first and foremost a social activity by which a magician performs an act in front of the audience, and the act actually culminates with the audience experiencing an impossible event. That's what defines magic in our hands. It's not simply deception, it's not trickery, it's experiencing the illusion of impossibility. That's something that has happened in front of you. You know it is impossible.
Right. So, and you talk a lot about how our visual system works. So, but because we probably don't have time to go into all the specifics, what would you say are some of the most important aspects for people to know about how it works that play a role in how we experience magic?
Well, first, that vision is not about image transmission per se. It might be counterintuitive, but it's about information processing. And there are several reasons for that. There are biological constraints by which we cannot operate with images as we think about them that would form automatically as this flux of photons reach our retinas and we construct the image. This is something more complex than that. And the biological constraints are first that we experience the world based on 2D impressions that the world generates in our retinas, and from that we have to construct these mental images. And then there is also a limitation in the amount of information that we can process. We have a sensor that is extremely dense. We have over 100 million photoreceptors in the back of each of our eyes. They capture a lot of information, and that information has to be sent out to the brain in order to be further processed and generate these impressions that I was talking about. And there's a huge information bottleneck right there, because we go from the 100 million photoreceptors to just 1 million of fibers in each one of our optic nerves. And all these constraints that limit our capacity to process information to us lead to the idea that our brains are constantly predicting what we are seeing. So we are trying to fill in the gaps of the missing information because of these huge bottlenecks based on previous experience, past experiences or memory of the physical properties of the world and so on and so forth, which leads to predictive processing in the end. So in a sense, visual perception is visual prediction. So we predict with what we perceive. We are predicting the causes in the world of the things that we see. And that has a huge influence for magic, of course.
And I mean, because we have a sort of fragmented experience of reality, why would a system like this evolve? What would be evolutionarily advantageous about it?
It is quick. It allows us to react to changes in the world immediately, because we don't have to process all the information that is available at each moment to us. We just have to acquire practical knowledge about the things that are out there. We don't have to be right on the spot. We don't have to be physically precise about the nature of the world. We just have to be precise enough so we survive in this world. And this is really advantageous. Yes.
You also talk about memory in the book. So why is memory important in the context of magic?
Well, you can think of magic as as I mentioned at the beginning, as a social interaction, in which every gesture of the magician, every maneuver, everything that she does is understood by the audience because we all live in the same world, have had the same heritage as a human species, and most likely very similar learning processes, social and physical learning processes interacting with this world. So when we see a magician gesture, it triggers a stream of consciousness that recalls all our past memories about this type of gestures and interactions. So we are constantly anticipating from what we've seen, what is coming next. And magician plays with that string of causal connections, let's say, like that, to break it at some point and give us the impression of impossibility. But it's all based on memory, on our memory of how things work in the world, how human conventions are established in social relations, and so on and so forth. To give you an example, in one of the tricks, which is the cut and recomposed rope, where the magician has a rope, cut it in pieces, and then reconstruct the integrity of the rope, midway during the trick, he would tie the different pieces using knots that are very familiar to us. Actually, they are not. They are not at all really like the knots that we would do in real life. But the magician, she struggles to make her hand movements recapture the type of regular knot that we are habituated to, that we know how it's done. That way we anticipate what's coming next, and she has triggers.
So there are different types of memory. Which ones are there, and what are the ones that play a role in magic?
Well, I love to say that all of them, but of course, when magicians perform actions, there's an implicit memory of motor memory or behavioral memory that we recapture because we are simulating their actions in our heads as we see them, as we experience them, right? There's also a lot of iconic memory. Jordi, please join in whenever you want, because this is
perhaps the most important one is the working memory or the short-term memory. The short-term memory, we need the short-term memory for all in this life, no? Now we're using the short-term memory to answer your questions, to anticipate new words and so on. The point is that this short-term memory or working memory, now doesn't matter the distinction at present, has a limited capacity. And it's easily you can saturate it easily. This is something that provokes many small problems in everyday life. But magicians learn to interfere or to saturate this memory after their effects, no? And this is an advantage for the magicians, because can ask you different demands on attention, for instance, and you can deviate the attention of the audience, and you can do a lot of things after a saturation, after break the capacity of the short-term memory.
I understand. And since you mentioned attention, how does our attention work? What do we tend to focus our attention on?
Well, attention, it's how we call when we filter and focus and concentrate in something, okay? That's attention. We need attention in order to process the information, because if you do not attend things, you cannot perceive, you cannot obtain what really means what you are attending. Okay, so magicians learn to, after centuries of empiric work, after trial and error, magicians really are the kings of manipulation of the attention. They invent a word for this misdirection. No, misdirection. It's a word used in the world of magicians that represents or means all the different systems that magicians know to manipulate the attention, and basically two things: to deviate, no, to put the attention in an area or in that magicians needs in order to do other things that you cannot, that you don't attend, and the second one it's to saturate the short-term memory that attention needs, the short-term memory, in order to produce a conflict of different attentions, no, that you cannot raise appropriately. No.
Bear in mind that attention is also a bottleneck, is selectively concentrating on a discrete aspect of the information we receive. About 1% of the visual information that we receive can be attended to at all. So this is a huge constraint also on that is, if it is properly manipulated by magicians, conditions tremendously what we see and what we miss of a thing.
Could you give us an illustrative example of how magicians direct attention?
One of the simplest ones, I might start, Jordi, and then you can follow if you want, but one of the simplest one is the control of gaze, human gaze. So there's a saying in the magic world that the audience looks at where the magician is looking. So simply by the magician, by diverting his gaze from the place where the secret behind the trick is happening, the audience will follow the magician's eyes. But this is totally involuntary, and even in most cases, it falls below the level of even that they are diverting their gaze from the magician's hands, for instance. That is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it are the movements themselves that capture attention. Movements of the hands and divert attention from the trick is happening. For instance, if I do this, if I drop one of my hands while I raise the other, the one that's raising will capture more attention than the one that is dropping, for instance, and this type of thing.
Do you want to add anything to it, Dr. Camí, or should I move to the next question?
That's all right for me, yes.
Okay. So in the book regarding memory still, you also talk about how it has a reconstructive character. It's not just that, for example, we see things and we store them as they are. After the fact, we reconstruct our past experiences. So could you tell us about that and what role that specific aspect of memory plays in experiencing magic?
It's a minor role. We recover all when we try to recover, something we are reconstructing, But in magic, this is a minor role because you can manipulate the memory during the presentation of an effect, but the role of memory is after a magic session, a magic show. The behavior of our memories are very similar of how we forget all in this life. So you are putting an emphasis on memories, but really in magic, magic can modify, can manipulate the memories, but this is not the most important cognitive interference in magic. No, the most important one are two: the camouflage, no, the occultation of things, and the manipulation of the attention. With these two mechanisms, magic really works 70–80% of all these tricks in terms of cognitive interference, because magicians use another techniques and other methodologies. They are artists, etc., etc., etc. Okay, and in addition, that depends of the particular magic effect, because there are magic effects that are based on optical illusions, for instance, no, and there are other magical effects that are based on many things, but nothing about cognitive interference. No? That depends of the magic effect.
So, yeah, reconstructive memory, just to add a tiny bit, it's actually a theory of memory recall. So what influences is the magic experience after the fact, meaning what you take home after you've seen a magic show is going to be influenced by many other cognitive processes that happen to you afterwards. And that is interesting in itself, because magicians tend to, they think that if they do things in a certain way, they will enhance this magic experience after the fact, which is something that we are a bit skeptical about, but they truly believe that that is the case.
Could you tell us about the phenomenon of change blindness, which I think is also important here?
Well, change blindness is, as you said, is a phenomenon of visual perception that occurs when a visual stimulus, a visual image, a visual object changes without the viewer of or the observer noticing the change. And in order to happen, there are two main techniques for inducing change blindness in an audience. One of them is to change the object through visual interruptions, like, for instance, a flash of light or something like that. And the other one is for the change to occur at a very slow pace, right in front of your eyes, but a very slow pace. And I'm sure you've seen demonstrations in the internet where you have a still image that suddenly changes the color of the background over a time period of a minute or so, and you don't notice that. No? And the other famous change blindness demonstration, one object changes from flash to flash, and you don't notice it very much, right? And this is something that that's happening constantly to us. But these changes are not common in real life. But magicians make use of them. For instance, the first experimental demonstration of change blindness was in the 90s by Dan Simons. But the first use that we have documented of change blindness in magic is the Princess Card Trick by Henry Harding in 1905. A century before it was actually documented in psychology. That is, well, in our hands, what makes magic so interesting as a tool to investigate cognitive phenomena.
Ricardo, the change blindness, it's one of the most relevant examples in magic of how magicians take advantage of this limited capacity of the because if you don't see things that really exist, it's because our short-term memory cannot process this amount of information, no? And magicians take advantage of this.
Right.
Attention blindness, or this attention blindness. It's
inattentional blindness.
Yes, it's another phenomenon related to the attention that it's also based on this limited capacity of our short-term memory.
I understand. So by studying how people experience magic and magic tricks, what can we learn about the unconscious aspects of our mind? I mean, about the unconscious processes that are supposedly happening all the time under our awareness.
Well, consider that our cognition is situated in the sense that it is embedded in social and physical circumstances. So all our perception has to be situated that way, but also has to be part of a stream of consciousness, meaning that I'm going to borrow now words from Anil said, which he took from, or go back from Helmholtz and even earlier in the 11th century Avicenna, that is that we are constantly hallucinating the world. But taking hallucination in this case with a grain of salt. It means that is a controlled hallucination in the sense that is actually situated in external causes, right? So all our perception has to be situated in context, physical, but also in this stream of consciousness. What magicians do is they are able to modulate your stream of consciousness together with the modulation of the environment that they perform when constructing their tricks and so on and so forth. So by doing so, I think that they are kind of showing us a way of testing different theories of consciousness. I think that is the main message here.
Okay. So one aspect of our psychology we haven't talked about yet that I think, or at least you talk about in the book, and it seems is relevant, is decision making. So what sort of role does decision making play in magic?
Jordi, you want to start, or do you want me to start?
In magic, you can manipulate decisions, of course, no? But small decisions, during the presentation of the effect. No? And as far as we know, the magicians interfere what we call the instinctive decisions, the non-conscious decisions, the automatic decisions. That by the way, it's the 99% of our decisions, no? Every minute. So magic cannot interfere a decision when you ask something and you ask a rational decision or decision, no decision that you need time and you can. Magic don't like this kind of decisions. No, magic can manipulate you in these automatic, immediate decisions. No? Well, there are effects that are based on and that use these kinds of interference, of course, and is an example on how magic can also interfere different cognitive processes. No?
Would you like to add anything to that, Dr. Martínez?
No, it's exactly like that. For instance, many techniques that magicians call forcings, and they create the idea of a volitional choice, of a free choice in the audience when they find out a deck of cards and pick up a card, any card you want. Actually, your options are very limited, and they know exactly what they are. But the experience by the audience is that they actually freely chose the card that they wanted to. And this type of thing, where what they manipulate is how the decision is felt by the audience. That is what they manipulate. They don't manipulate the decision themselves as much. They manipulate how that decision is felt by the audience, which is very interesting as well.
But in some effects, no, in a very few effects. Be careful, because these kind of manipulations exist in magic, but are not so frequent.
Yeah, because they can fail.
Yes, okay, and
They can fail, and then they have to cover up using different techniques.
Magicians, as humans, like to do safe effects, effects with safety that they will work, and manipulate the decisions. You need to have a B plan, etc., etc. It's not easy. It's only for experts.
Right. Does the cultural context matters in how people experience magic, and if they perhaps fall for some tricks and not others?
Yes, it does, and it does very much, actually. Remember, we started by saying that magic works because we share with the magician the same internal model of the world. We have evolved our brains in a similar fashion, so we can anticipate what he or she is doing based on that previous experience that we took from our species, our cultural background, and our personal experiences. All that matters. Cultural background is very relevant as well, because if we are, for instance, in a culture that actually believes in magic, then the illusion of the impossible is different from a culture that does not, is more rational in that sense, if you will, and does not believe that magic can happen. And this is extremely evident not only in different cultural backgrounds, but also in different social backgrounds, like, for instance, different ages of the audiences. Magic for kids or magic for adults is very different as well, because kids have not yet formed very well the internal model of the world. They not fall for the premises that the magician thinks they're falling. They don't anticipate as well, so they catch up on many of the tricks of the magician. While adults, because they are constantly jumping ahead, they are constantly predicting based on the previous movements of the magician, then they fall for most of the tricks. And the same is with the different cultural backgrounds. So you do have to tune, or you do have to tailor your show. And this is something that magicians know very well when they move to for instance, perform magic in African cultures or in Asian cultures. It's not exactly the same.
So if you look at how magic is done across different societies, it's probably different. And I mean, probably magicians do not know that consciously, but the way they develop tricks takes that into consideration.
Yeah, you should distinguish between how people react, because in different, for instance, people react differently in Japan. If you compare the Japanese people with the European people, seeing magic effects, seeing impossible effects, This is in one side how we react, and doesn't matter because we react different, but we understand magic as something impossible because there is an artist that do this thanks to use methodologies and tricks. And another question is how people feel a magic effect. And there are cultures that can feel or can receive this magic effect as something very hard, not necessarily understanding that you are in front of an artist that do tricks. So these are the two different aspects that should be taken into consideration when we discuss about cultures and illusionism. Okay.
I think that the main issue here is to acknowledge cognitive variability, to acknowledge the fact that we are all born with innate predispositions, differences in how we experience the world and how our personalities are tuned and how we react to things and how things actually feel to us. And this is true even within one culture, we are all different. And I think that embracing this variability is what makes magicians very powerful, because when they perform in front of an audience, they need to be successful 100% of the time. So even taking into consideration this cognitive variability that can be huge between different cultures or among different cultures, even taking that into account, magicians are very successful. So they have to be pointing to something that is very primitive, very solid, and shared among all of us. That is what makes magic so important.
Mm-hmm. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but we've been talking about how we can study cognitive science and neuroscience through magic by studying how magic works. So if culture matters here, then we can also make use of magic to understand how culture influences the development of human cognition and perhaps cultural evolution, correct?
Yes, I would say so, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I asked you that also because there's this big debate that occurs more within among evolutionary theorists. Some fall more on the biological side, on genetic evolution, and others more on the cultural aspects of how our cognition develops and cultural evolution. And I mean, this would certainly not be the only way of studying it, but we can also perhaps add to that debate by studying magic, correct?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I don't think of them. Genetic constraints and cultural context as opposing each other, but as working together. And magic can contribute at disentangling some of the effects that we see in cognitive development, of course. Yes.
Are modern people who live in industrialized societies and post-industrial societies less susceptible to magic just because, they believe less in supernatural stuff, for example?
No. Please. No, definitely
Go
no.
ahead.
And
The short answer would be no. No, even though we are surrounded by technological developments that defy our reasoning all the time, or that we don't know how it works. I mean, for instance, if you ask me, how is it possible that you can send a space shuttle to land in the moon at a precise location a week after a week after takeoff, it's certainly something that would defy the knowledge of most people on Earth, and it would seem impossible. But it's something that that is not impossible for the human as a species. There will always be a window of opportunity for magicians to trick you, because all that is needed is that you perceive that you have seen, or that you feel that what you have seen is not possible for a human. There will always be room of opportunity for that. For instance, flying. Things like that, stuff like that, will always defy our reason.
Yes, I like to say that there are many magic effects or tricks that has centuries. They are very old, and still they are working.
Caps and balls.
Working very well, because what do not change, what has not been changed is how our brain works.
Our cognition.
So when Egyptians in the Bronze era still are working. Another question is, these tricks are old-fashioned or not? Okay, but they basic work, basic strategies of how the brain acts. No? And
Technological tricks, of course, they evolve with technology at the same pace, but
yes.
Cognitive tricks are still there.
Yes, technology can help for gimmicks and for many.
Well, I'm thinking
for a
of
particular effect, no? But
I'm thinking of this trick by was it Jordan, who could light up thousands of candles at the same time simultaneously on the theater. That trick amazed people in the 19th century, but as soon as electricity became well known, that trick wouldn't work anymore because people knew already what was the secret behind the trick.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that perhaps a good example of how technology might influence how tricks are performed and how people, magicians, take advantage of technology to perform their tricks. A good example of that would be how they use, for example, video cameras and camera angles to do sleight of hand tricks with cards, right?
Technology can help a magician to improve the secrets of the tricks, no? But people today know that there exists this machine. Okay, today people don't know how this machine works. Okay,
Yeah.
but people do not
realize
this is not a mystery. It's something that we don't understand. No, that's different of magic. No, magic makes impossible effects. No. Strictly speaking, no impossible effects, no. Luis,
no, I was just going to add that one thing that we also say in the book is that real impossible effects, real magic, is much easier to achieve in a person-to-person direct relationship between the magician and her audience. If you watch a magic trick on TV, the strength of the effect is not the same. It's never the same. Because there's this a screen that is dividing or increasing or breaking or introducing this fourth wall that separates the magician from the audience.
Okay.
We are very used by cinema to experience really impossible things, but we know that they are fiction, real. The point of the magician is to present something that is not real, obviously not real because it's impossible, as real.
Right. I understand. So, I mean, would you say that because magicians have this sort of accumulated knowledge about how they can trick people's perception, that in sort of a cultural, evolutionary way, they were doing science or not?
To me, Jordi is also a magician, and I'm not. I just simply study magic. So the first thing that I noticed when I got into magic was how academic actually magic seemed to me, because they develop theories, they perform experiments, meaning that they design the trick, they practice the trick, and they present the trick to limited audiences to see how effective the trick is, and then they transmit or they convey the results in form of papers or oral presentations in meetings as well. So to me, this is one thing that I told Jordi when we first started collaborating on this project, was that to me magic seemed so much like science, so similar. So in a sense, they are probing our cognitive abilities all the time, and they are keeping records of that, and they are transmitting that information. So yeah, in a sense, you could say that they are studying cognition using different means, but as rigorous most of the time as the ones that we might use.
Right. So one last question then. We've been talking about how understanding how magic works can help us add knowledge to how our minds work. We've talked about things like memory, attention, decision making, our visual system, etc. Do you think it can also shed light on new aspects of human cognition, or at least aspects we haven't explored here today?
That's the point. That's the point, because there are few scientists, very few scientists and magicians that are still exploring details magic works. That's relevant, but we know a lot about this, no? And magicians are the people who knows better how magic tricks, because as Luis has told now recently, magicians after trial and error they improve the magic effects. So they know how they know the business, no? The point that we think it's more relevant, it's to use magic effects as a toolkit to know more, or to go in deep in cognitive processes. No? That's the point. They use the magic, magic effects as a way to do better and more science in the cognitive world. No? That's our point. That's what we defend. That's why we try to attract the world of neuroscience to magic. No? That's why our book, it's in first at all, it's a neuroscience book that uses magic as an example of many different basic mechanisms or cognitive mechanisms. No? We put neuroscience first, okay, and we propose and we say and we practice that magic it's a tool to do more and better science.
And it's very relevant that it's a tool that operates in ecological conditions.
Yes.
I think that most of our neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience experiments take place in laboratory conditions, where we, in order to gain control over the variables, we strip out of context, social, physical context, the situations that we use as experimental setups. That is very unnatural. That is not how our cognition operates in the world. We are being very reductionists in that sense, which has been successful to actually uncover many things about how human cognition works. But now, if we want to move forward, we have to take the chance of using approaches that work in very ecological conditions, meaning not only in natural settings, but also while humans are performing the tasks the way they would perform in their everyday lives. And we think that magic actually provides such a toolkit to be used. So our efforts are now to try to gain some of the control over variables that we have in the laboratory and to be able to use them in ecological conditions through magic. That is, I think, what's ahead for us in this field.
So, I mean, the context of magic is an ecologically valid one to study human cognition, right? Because possibly someone might in some way criticize that, say that, oh, it just works in a magic context, it's people manipulating other people or something like that. Do you?
Not only because magicians perform impromptu magic, which is approaching somebody on the street, in the middle of the street, and performing magic impromptu, right there. So that is purely ecological, because the person that's being approached is not prepared for a magic show. He's just going minding their own business in the middle of the street and suddenly encounter a social interaction, right? How do you react to that social interaction is meaningful, ecologically valued.
We learn, for instance, that there are many magic effects that works in a particular context and can fail in another context. The same magic effect, no? For instance, the context, no? And if you wish to do science and to know better how magic works, you need to reproduce, no, the real life context, no? Because if a magic effect works in a context and don't works in another context, this is a new understanding, not a context. It's a bedrock, no? It's a key point of the illusionists, for instance. No? Right. That's why we need to use magic as a tool, no? As a tool to understand the relevance of context and many other things. No? And this, you cannot study this in a laboratory conditions, because laboratory conditions are something rare and uncommon.
Right. So just before we go, would you like to message the book, perhaps? I mean, we've talked about it, about some of the topics you explore there, but if there would be any take-home message, I mean, any particular reason why you decided to write the book, what would that be?
As Jordi was saying before, we realized and we made a careful study of all the knowledge about the cognitive science of magic that has been produced over the past, I don't know, 2 millennia, I would say. The thing is that magic holds huge potential as a tool to study human cognition in ecological conditions, in ways that is situated both culturally and physically, opening up new venues of research. And there's very little that has been done so far in that direction. So what we wanted to write was a book that raised awareness about this fact, that introduced neuroscience through the lens of magic to a wider audience, and to see if we can start new venues of research through this interaction.
Okay, great. So the book is again The Illusionist Brain, the Neuroscience of Magic. I will be leaving a link to it in the description box of the interview. And Doctors Camí and Martínez, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, and it's been a huge pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Ricardo, for your huge interest.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the pleasure has been all ours. Thank you so much, Ricardo.